Welcome back to Morning Joe. Time now for our must-read opinion pages. But first, I'm going to update you on a story we couldn't get you at the top of the hour, which is on Occupy Wall Street. Supporters of the Occupy Wall Street movement say they have new momentum this morning. After a day of wide-scale demonstrations, protesters marked the 2-month anniversary of the movement with what they call the National Day of Action across several major cities. In New York, at least 300 people were arrested during several clashes between police and demonstrators. Police Commissioner Ray Kelly says 5 protesters were charged with felony assault. In all, 17 people were hurt, including 7 police officers. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg offered his take on the day's events.
Occupy Wall Street had predicted on their website that tens of thousands of people would be participating in today's protests, but there have been far fewer, and so far they have caused, I think, what can accurately be described as minimal disruptions to our city.
Bloomberg says he supports the protesters' First Amendment rights, but has no plans to let them rebuild their tent city in Zuccotti Park. So that's the latest on the New York situation there. And you write about it in today's Washington Post, Eugene Robinson.
What interests me about these protests is that they've kind of put this question of fairness and inequality on the agenda in a way that it wasn't before. And it's kind of made everybody talk about it. It's made Republicans talk about it as well as Democrats. And I think that's potentially significant as we go forward, no matter what happens to this protest. These were never large protests. That's another interesting thing. This is not like Vietnam where you had, 300,000 people in Washington saying, end the war, and you had to pay attention. These are small groups of people around the country and around the world who are raising something that I think it's time to raise.
Gene, but it's interesting. A poll, 2/3 of Americans actually are against it, the same amount that are against the Tea Party. As every day goes by and the message does not get articulated, and there is not a face behind the message, and it does not, the concept, to use your point, does not get clarified, doesn't it lose its credibility where all of a sudden it now just seems this ragtag? To me, when it first started, I was like, yeah, go. Now it seems like just purposeless as each day goes on, more and more so.
Well, I think if you're talking about, Occupy Wall Street specifically, and insofar as it's not really an organization, but at this phenomenon, I think I'm talking more about an atmospheric change, and I think it becomes more difficult, for example, as the campaign goes on, after people are out of the parks, after they've kind of gone home or whatever. I think we'll still be talking about some of these issues, and then someone will articulate it in a way that makes policy sense.
But there is no issue. We talk about Occupy Wall Street. If they just said simply one conceptual thought.
No. It's interesting.
As opposed to just fairness we all believe there should be fairness, but somebody, and I believe they need a spokesperson.
Yes.
I said this the other day, get an ex-Wall Streeter, somebody to put some flesh and blood and some credibility behind this thing. And if I was branding them and if I was doing a campaign, I'd say, let's go get a spokesperson.
So, Halpern, I want to ask you about that, because my 15-year-old asked, what is Occupy Wall Street at dinner last night? And it did not take long to give her an answer. It's clear what they're angry about.
We know what they're angry about, but you need a solution.
So, but why is it so hard to bring a name and a face to this movement?
They've chosen not to have that. They're very non-hierarchical.
Even more, I've seen people like Elizabeth Warren and other people in the political fray who've been truly criticized for having anything to do with their message. It almost seems like
they've not handled their brand well, as Donnie suggested. But
there is that.
As Eugene suggested, putting on the table the immorality and unworkability of the lack of income equality in this country is fantastic. Just as the Tea Party putting on the table the government's too big was fantastic. It's up to politicians and people who maybe now will run for Congress inspired by this to come up with the solutions. And it's up to the Democratic Party, with which they're more aligned, to figure out, can you sell to the public this notion that it is both immoral and unworkable to have all this wealth concentrated in the hands of just a few people?
Didn't the Tea Party launch some political careers and bring some people into Washington, for better or for worse?
And there's no sign they're doing that.
Exactly. That, I think, could be the key.
But if you want to be more specific, they're talking about the rigged game that is in Washington, which is that our politicians serve the interests of
I don't
wealthy
disagree
people
with that at
who
all.
give them money, of lobbyists who give them money, and people who have resources that most of us do not have to
That's
influence
right.
what happens in this country.
This
the
thing is
totally
2 months
agree
old.
with them.
So, let's give it a little more time than 2 months and
Right.
see if it does mushroom into something more like the Tea Party, which after all is decentralized. But suddenly people said, yeah, I'm part of the Tea Party over here and over there, and they did run for Congress, and they did.
I'm going to give an invitation if I was representing them. I think Warren Buffett should show up one day. A guy who talks about fairness. Wouldn't that be fascinating? Obviously, he's not going to agree with everything. If Buffett showed up at one of these movements and said, look, I'm obviously a capitalist, and I stand for everything that's great about capitalism, but I also stand for fairness. Can you imagine the credibility you give to movements? So, Mr. Buffett, put your money where your mouth is. Get on a plane. JetBlue, I think, flies in from Omaha but somebody like that, and I would love to see that.